Don't nobody know my trouble was gone.
You found it. It's the final InfoWarrior of the year, December 27th, 2009. A lot of people think we're on the cusp of another millennia. Actually, that's next year. But for all intensive purposes, if you watch VH1, it'll be the 2000 to 2009 special in about 4 or 5 years. It might not even take that long. They love that pop culture crap. But on this show, we are going to go over the biggest stories of the year. Take your calls all 3 hours. I'd love to hear what you think the biggest story of the year was. Was it the Bilderberg Group this year, having Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton join them just before the election? Was it Hardin, Montana? Is that the biggest story? Is it the H1N1 hoax? Is it this Senate bill that's just been passed, which is openly promoting euthanasia? There's a 10-page MSNBC / New York Times article massaging the issue, talking about how we need to drug old people to death. They talk about it like it's a long sleep, and we're just going to need to do it because, Grandpa at 88, we don't want him to live 2 more years very sick, do we? Is that the top story of the year? So many big stories. Is the fact that it came out this year, and just really a couple weeks ago, that the Mumbai terror attacks were definitely a CIA intelligence operation. That's huge news. We're going to get into this Christmas bomber also in this broadcast. But in the final few minutes of this first segment, I really want to wrap up what happened at Copenhagen, because that may be the biggest story of the year. It may not be the announcement of a new world order at the G20 and the G8 by Gordon Brown. It may be the fact that this 3-page communique that they put out is so broad and so criminal that it may actually surpass the almost 200-page document that they wanted the 190-plus nations to sign on to. Why do you say that, Jason? Well, again, this thing is so broad that when you go to Section 9, just on page 2, they admit that they are going to create a high-level panel which will be established under the guidance of the accountable to the conference of the parties to assess the contribution of the potential source of revenue, including alternative sources of finance, towards meeting this goal. And then they go on to say that the nations that did sign on somehow have to come up with $30 billion and then $100 billion by 2020. 2010 to 2012, we're in the $30 billion range. Now, it also says that parties who have signed on to this are subject to domestic auditing, supervision, and assessment. Think about that. Domestic auditing for a treaty that doesn't really have to be ratified because it's not a treaty. So again, they use their semantic word games to further their agenda just as ClimateGate breaks. Is ClimateGate the biggest story of the year? Is the fact that Phil Jones, Michael Mann, and others got caught red-handed manipulating the information? That may be the top story of the year. So many things happened this year, folks. We're not even discussing the GIVE Act. The GIVE Act was passed this year. Earlier today, Alex Jones was discussing the Boy Scouts being trained to take on domestic terrorists. Well, how about City Year getting all this funding and promoting nationally people in red, white, and black outfits saying that they are changed? That's a pretty big story. So again, all 3 hours, we're going to take your calls. You tell me what the most important story of the year is, all while we actually push forward and cover the news of today and even tomorrow. I mean, we get this stuff hot off the presses, folks. The Rothschild family. Now, there may not be a bigger family of influence out there. Some people may argue the Rockefellers, but a lot of people argue that the Rockefellers are really just an arm of the Rothschild dynasty. They are currently trying to promote a new Broadway musical based on their rags to riches story. And remember, the youngest Rothschild is out there promoting global warming. Oh, we need to save the world with a carbon tax for everybody. It's the InfoWarrior with Jason Bermas. We'll be back with your calls after this. Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.tv. So again, even though we had a great victory at exposing what the Copenhagen Climate Conference was really about, exposing the 190-page plus document that was going to bring in a global new world order government where we would be taxed to breathe, they passed an even broader piece of paper that they won't call a treaty that doesn't need to be ratified by 2/3. And I want to hearken back to November. Now, Lord Monckton wasn't the only person out there warning us that this was a global government takeover. Out on the EU Parliament, we had this gentleman come up and say this was about a new world order and really call the globalists out for what they are. So let's hit that clip, and then we're going to go to Alan, Craig, Michael, Chuck, and more. 888-201-2244. Hit it. And this is Nick Griffin addressing European Parliament on the 24th of November.
Kolega Oresteros, 1 minut. Przepraszam. Kolega Nick Griffin.
Mr. Nick Griffin for 2 minutes.
Everyone agrees that climate change is the biggest challenge facing humanity. That's the constant claim of the political elite, and it's a lie. Everyone does not agree. Thousands of scientists dispute the very existence of man-made global warming, citing natural cyclical changes that saw vineyards in Roman northern England and a Swedish army march over the frozen Baltic in 1658 to Copenhagen. As an army of global warming zealots marches to Copenhagen, the truth is that their Orwellian consensus is based not on scientific agreement, but on bullying, censorship, and fraudulent statistics. In the words of leading climatologist Professor Lindzen, future generations will wonder in bemused amazement that the early 21st century's developed world went into hysterical panic over a globally average temperature increase of a few tenths of a degree, and on the basis of gross exaggerations of highly uncertain computer projections contemplated a rollback of the industrial age. In fact, there will be no bemused amazement, for the reason for this hysteria is clear. It is designed to provide the excuse for a political project of the globalists to replace national democracy with New World Order global governance. It has nothing to do with science and everything to do with a globalist common purpose to tax and control us while making billions for corporations in the green industrial complex. The anti-Western intellectual cranks of the left suffered a collective breakdown when communism collapsed. Climate change is their new theology, a secular religious hysteria complete with Pope Al Gore, carbon credit indulgences, and the persecution of heretics. But the heretics will have a voice in Copenhagen, and the truth will out. Climate change is being used to impose an anti-human utopia as deadly as anything conceived by Stalin or Mao.
Boom, and there it is. That is a 2-minute concise wrap-up of what Copenhagen was and is, because they're going to keep trying to progress this agenda. With the United States signing on, the EU, China, India, and other big nations, they want the small ones as well. They'd like to get a treaty in place. They'd like this panel, this high-level panel that they're putting together, be the start of their world government. All right, I promise I go to your calls. Let's go to Alan in Florida. Alan, what's on your mind?
You know, you're killing me. I love audiobooks, and I just discovered you guys.
Oh, awesome.
So listen, I'm in shock at what I'm hearing, but you're so right. Look at our water. The newspapers just released a story that there's 300 some odd chemicals in our water, but that's okay. So I'm going to be calling one of your sponsors soon.
Oh, excellent.
In Miami-Dade, and I guess the whole country now, to get your driver's license, the tag renewed. My God, you've got to come up with a birth certificate. You've got to come up with a passport.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you register people to vote, you don't have to prove you're a citizen.
Well, let me tell you something, Alan. It actually goes a lot further than that. This year with the census in this country, for example, they took Acorn and they GPSed every home within 3 yards, within 9 feet of the front driveway or the front porch. Obviously, you can go on Google Earth and you can zoom into most homes, but this was a national effort to track, trace, and database everybody's living area. Now, on top of that, you look across enemy lines, really, and you go to Afghanistan and Iraq, and the census there is a little different. You see, they want to biometrically scan everybody there, and since it's an occupied nation, they'll get away with it. This is the Department of Defense. They're going to take their iris scans, and in some respects, they already have. If you have a job with them, they already have your biometric iris scan and your facial recognition data, as well as your digital fingerprints, because they don't even do regular thumbprinting and fingerprinting anymore at most police stations. They have these things digitally. So this system has been created on a small level. Let's look at Hepting versus AT&T, for instance. It is admitted that AT&T and all major telecommunication companies have a secret room, and please go check this out. If you're a new listener, you need to check this out. The National Security Agency has a secret room which diverts all information, splits it into two different databases, one that AT&T has and one that they have. And then they run this information, whether it be your cell phone calls, your texts, your emails, what websites you visit, how long you're on a website. They then go through that with Carnivore and Promise software and other software that's still classified. They look for keywords and recognition and phrases, and then they put you into a database. They figure out how you act, whether or not you're going to stay in line, whether or not you're a threat to them.